everybody, Bayman with PIXERA here. Got a new protocol that we've implemented in PIXERA Control, MSC, or MIDI Show Control, that I wanted to show you today. If you don't know about MSC, it's a show protocol that is typically used in entertainment or theatrical spaces to have devices triggering other devices. In the case we're going to look at today, a lighting console triggering a media server. And it's a protocol that allows those things to happen a little more reliably, a little smoother, a little easier. And we've implemented a new MSC module in PIXERA. So let's go ahead and take a look. So over here, I've got a project I've already built. I've got screens tab, mapping, already assigned my display here, and the compositing tab. I've just built a basic little show. I've got Act 1 and Act 2 as two different timelines. Act 1, I've got cues 1 through 5 here for each different piece of content. And Act 2, I've got cue 200.1, 200.2, 200.3. That's a cue structure I've seen before from a lighting console. And in Act 1 or Act 2, basically wherever we have our cues, we just want to make sure that our cue label matches the cue number that we're going to be using on our lighting console. So today we're going to be using ETC EOS software in order to control PIXERA. So we want to make sure that in our lighting console, our cues over there match our cues in PIXERA. So the main kind of space where this workflow is going to happen is in PIXERA Control, and we're going to go ahead and search for MIDI. And I'm going to pull in two modules. I'm going to pull in my MIDI module and my MIDI Show Control module. And so in our MIDI module, we've got some configuration to do here. So I'm going to click on my properties and go over to the inspector. And we want to change our MIDI in device from this loop MIDI port 1 to, I'll click the drop down and go to loop MIDI port 0. Now, I've already set up this loop MIDI as a driver on my machine. I'll include the link in the video description, but what we want to, if you want to implement this yourself, you can go find that. But basically, this MIDI in device is whatever MIDI device you're using to listen for MIDI. So once we do that, we're going to click init, and we can see that this green light comes up. So that means that we have a connection to this MIDI in device. So from here, we're listening. So I'm going to go to receive, and we've got a new folder here called MSC. And I can take this receive MSC action and I can connect it to my MIDI Show Control module, the receive action over here. And that's really it in terms of listening for MSC and getting it to the right place. The last step here is we want to click on our module here and go over to the inspector, and we just need to check whether we have what timeline we're actually sending to. So it'll auto populate with timeline 1, but I'll just click the drop down and select Act 1 to make sure that when we receive any cues, we're going to be triggering the timeline Act 1. We've got some other options here that we can turn on or off if we want. And then this last box here, this list executor, this is the cue stack on our lighting software that we're going to be listening for. So in this case, the ETC EOS software on cue stack 1 is going to be triggering timeline Act 1. Okay, so now that that's done, let's jump over to ETC EOS software and we'll do some configuration over there, show our cue stack, and then we can look at how our output is affected based on the cues that we are firing over from EOS. So let's do that. Okay, so now we're over here in EOS, and over here we've got some system setup that we can do down here. We've got some system settings. Specifically, we want to make sure that MSC transmit is on. We also want to go down to device settings and go down to show control and make sure that we've got the right MIDI devices here that we're actually transmitting with, and turn on our MIDI transmit. All of these configuration settings might change depending on your setup, what console you're using, whether it's a ETC console or some other lighting console. All this could be different. So I'll jump back to live here. And then we're going to look at our cue stack. And in our cue stack, we can see I've got a bunch of cues set up. So cue 1, 2, got a cue with a bunch of decimals here, 3, 4, 5. And like I said, I've got Act 2 set up as a bunch of 200 dot cues. So if I activate my output over in PIXERA, and I'm going to go ahead and turn on an output in my overlay here. And if I fire some cues over here, we ought to be able to see, and indeed we do, that as I fire Q1, my timeline has started. And if I fire 2Q, I get another video, and Q3, oh, not Q3, excuse me, I don't have this Q in here yet, but if I fire Q3, I've got one. Q4, got another one, and Q5. So that's all working as expected. Honestly, it's pretty easy to set up so long as you've got all of your MIDI configuration set up properly. All right, so I've jumped back over to PIXERA to look at what's happening with our MIDI Show Control module as we're jumping through those cues. So let me trigger those cues again. And we can see in MIDI Show Control that that cue is actually called up within the module. And let's scrub through a couple more. Remember, we're missing this one. And we can see it's triggering all those cues for us. Now, what if we want this 2.535 to actually trigger one of our cues on the timeline here? Well, we can just click on one of our cues and say 2.535. And now, if I run back over to EOS, if I click go here, the next video should go for me. And indeed, it does, which is great. Okay, well, that's all fine and dandy. Let's stop this timeline. But what if we want this MIDI Show Control module can only trigger one timeline? What if we want to trigger a second timeline? Well, we can just drag in another module here, and I can connect this action to the receive action here. And instead of Act 1, I want to trigger Act 2. And now, if I were to go to my timelines here, let's go to Act 2, and then back to EOS. And if I hit go, there's 200.1 and 200.2 and 200.3. So we can actually use one configuration of our MIDI module to send to a bunch of different timelines. Now, another pretty cool feature over here is that I can actually turn the logging on in both of these modules. And if I start hitting go to give it some data, then what I can actually do, and I'll jump over to my other screen here, is I can pull this, I can pull up the logging information, which is found in program data. And if I look at this control log and we scroll all the way down, we can actually see when a cue list was called and when that cue was called. So we can have the time of when PIXERA actually received that data. So if you're ever troubleshooting something, you can check what data was received on the MIDI network, and you can actually cross-check that with any other information you may have. Well, all right, everybody. I think that's pretty much it for me here. I just want to thank you for coming by. And if you got any questions, please leave a comment or shoot us an email. But otherwise, have a good one. Bye.